Retro.
What's up, guys? This is Daniel Logan, Boba Fett from Attack of the Clones, The Clone Wars, Book of Boba, Skywalker Saga game, and hopefully many more things in the Star Wars galaxy. You are listening to Jay and Dennis on Podcast Stardust. Yep, this is the way I've spoken.
Hello, and welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we're a little giddy because our recording software did something we're completely unexpecting. So please forgive us for a second. But at any rate, we're going to wrap up this week with another look at Star Wars news. But before we get into that, Jay, you want to remind everybody where we can be found on social media?
Yes, we are happy to share that we're on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
All right. The digital line, the signal is boosted at the maximum output. The shield is down. We are now broadcasting the galaxy. I nobody cares because this is so inside baseball for the show. But software actually told us it was recording, which it had not done for months, and it completely surprised us, and we haven't stopped laughing since. So anyway.
Oh, gosh. It's the little things, you know, Dennis?
Yeah, indeed.
Truly.
Indeed. It makes our evenings. Okay. So up first, we'll get into some movie news, and The Mandalorian and Grogu is going to be featured in Empire magazine on May 12th, but they put out a preview today, which is actually the 5th. This episode is going on the 6th, so one day early, of what we can see. And most of what they had, Jay, was an interview with Dave Filoni. And so they were talking about, in this, paraphrasing, that they're trying to make things bigger for the cinema because it has to be for a movie screen. And one of the things that Filoni mentioned is that there's going to be massive practical sets, puppetry galore, and stop motion courtesy of Phil Tippett's studio.
That's exciting.
Well, yeah, all those things did my Star Wars fan heart a lot of good when I heard that. I mean, I love The Mandalorian well enough, and most of that was done on the volume, and that I would have been happy if they'd just done that as well. But just to hear them go back to all those traditional ways of making Star Wars was, does it impact the final product we're going to see on screen? I don't know. Probably not in this age because CGI is so good, but there's just something about that tickles all the nostalgia fields.
Oh, yeah. And it's a whole different ecosystem of Star Wars. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And, for those of us that have been with Star Wars for so long, I do think that you're absolutely right. It's kind of that pipeline to nostalgia, but yet bridging that to what the Mando and Grogu movie is all about, which I think is super cool. It's such a smart idea, quite honestly.
Yeah. And here's the best part about it is that Dave Filoni understands that all of these advantages that they have with filming The Mandalorian and Grogu, the ability to use large practical sets and puppetry and Tippett Studio and stuff like that, doesn't really matter unless they make it count. And the quote is, "What can't you do now?" is a question of, is the audience going to believe it? Are they going to feel it? That comes through the characters. If the characters are connecting, then the adventure plays, the action plays, the tension plays. So he's basically getting to, it's like, yes, it's great that he and Jon Favreau have all these additional toys to use while they're making this movie. But if the relationships between the characters aren't there, if the camaraderie is not there, then it's all for naught. And he's dead on with that, because so much what we appreciate about Star Wars is the banter between Han and Leia, the joking and the good natured ribbing between Luke and Han, the sly comments made between Obi-Wan and Anakin and the like there. And if that type of stuff is not there, we're just not going to feel it, and it's not going to be successful.
Right. And that's what I think is so cool about the Mandalorian and Grogu being on the big screen is because they were already established characters on Disney
Mhm.
Plus. And so again, it's this kind of bridge into theatrical Star Wars from those characters that we already know. And I mean, let's face it, Grogu is arguably the new face of Star Wars. I mean, for this new era, especially for people that have been watching the series on Disney Plus, and even if you haven't, you know who Grogu is. I mean, and
Sure.
most people call him Baby Yoda or whatever, but yeah, and I think that chemistry that you pointed out of the characters is what's really going to, I don't wanna say carry the movie, but it certainly is going to be, a big plus for it, that's for sure.
Indeed. So, speaking of being the face for Star Wars in this area, they also teased the covers that are going to be out for this edition of Empire. And the first one, I love these. These are
Mhm.
so much fun. It's the Mandalorian standing next to Grogu, who is standing on a director's chair, clearly on a movie set. And so that's fun. But then if you're a subscriber, they have an exclusive, which is Grogu standing in the same director's chair, but he's got one of those clapper boards, that has the Mandalorian Grogu, and then Slate 113 take 8, 1138, very clever,
Nice.
written on it as well. But that's just fun. It's pretty cool that they went that way.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So who do you think is actually in the armor? Do you think that it's Pedro or do you think it's Brendan
No.
Wayne?
Brendan Wayne, Lateef Crowder, some guy on set that has the same similar dimensions. It's not important for that photo, I think, unless they did have Pedro around to do photos, which they might have, that'll appear in the issue somewhere. For that photo, it could have been anybody.
Heck, it could be Dave Filoni. You never know.
It seemed a little svelte for Dave, as much as I like him, but at any rate. Okay, well, in other Star Wars news, Ryan Gosling is out there promoting Hail Mary, which is his next movie coming out, I think, this weekend or shortly thereafter. Book by Andy Weir. Have you had an opportunity to read that?
No, I haven't, but I'm so looking forward to the movie.
Yeah, I read the book. I've read everything that Andy Weir's done, and so it's really fun. It's the premise is that the sun is cooling inexplicably somehow, and Ryan Gosling plays a character who's actually a middle school teacher, and he figures out why, and then he gets sent on the mission to find the solution. And while he's there, he meets the first ever alien in space, and they work together to figure everything out. So, anyways, go. I'm going to check out the movie at some point. I just don't know when, but I'm looking forward to it as well. But while promoting this, of course, he gets asked about Starfighter, because anyone who's ever attached to Star Wars can't do any project without being asked about Star Wars.
Of
And
course.
so while speaking with Gizmodo, they pointed out that thus far he has not engaged in any franchises when it comes to
Mhm.
movies. He hasn't done Marvel, he hasn't done DC, not Star Trek, none of that. So what was it about Star Wars? And his response was, it was Sean's enthusiasm and his vision and the script. And I just avoid these things because they never felt right. And I'm glad I did, because I feel like similar to a book like this, it was worth waiting for. And it's like a once in a lifetime opportunity. So that's pretty cool. But, you know, look, I don't mean to talk out of both sides of my mouth. And I know I've been promoting a lot about like all the hype that I love that's coming up with the Mandalorian Grogu and looking forward to Starfighter and stuff like that. There's a lot of people that are parsing everything that's come out of this little revelation, that suddenly people are realizing Gosling's never done a franchise. And here he is in Star Wars. He's never played the same character twice. So what does that mean for Starfighter?
Mhm.
Is this
Yeah.
character not going to make it to the end of the movie, or, premature to say, just because, you know, we've remarked that Kathleen Kennedy is talking about what's his face, Flynn Gray, the kid that's going to be in this, and how
Yes.
remarkable he is. And,
Mhm.
there's some room for him to be another one, but she didn't mention Ryan Gosling as a potential, that, this character may not make it into the movie. But are we reading too much into this, or what do you think?
Well, I hadn't even entertained the idea that his character may not survive the movie. So that was kind of like a whoa, an aha moment there for me
Mhm.
because, as you pointed out, with him not playing the same character twice, that would definitely give him a little loophole out of that. But then, in the same regard, he has, as you said, gone on record just to say that Sean Levy's vision and the script quality and everything just really drew him to Star Wars as a franchise. And, who knows what that could be. And Ryan Gosling has also said this is not just a job, this is the job. This is
Yeah.
Star Wars. And
Mhm.
so anybody that's ever worked on it is going to, I would think, have that kind of revelation and just the way that it makes people feel humbled about working for and on a Star Wars project. So, I don't know, that's really interesting though to think about that he took that leap, almost like a leap of faith into
Mm.
a franchise when he's been kind of famously known for avoiding them.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, like, what are his biggest movies? Like Barbie, when he played Ken,
Yeah.
it's probably up there amongst the biggest ones he's done, and I liked him in The Fall Guy. I thought that was good. So,
Yes, that was a good
yeah,
one too.
that's a fun one.
Mhm.
Very underrated, but anyway. Okay, well, on to some television news, and Leslie Headland was recently on the George Lucas talk show and kind of got an opportunity to talk about some of her visions for what would have been season 2 of The Acolyte, and the whole concept of what Yoda would have done with Vernestra Rowe to cover up things that happened in season 1 of The Acolyte, and this notion of, like, him exhibiting a dark side. And the response to that was, for sure, yeah. And then basically it's going on that, he was going to help Vernestra Rowe cover things up by blaming Soul, who Osha killed, and then, blaming him for Indara, Torben, Kanelka, and Jecki and Yord's deaths and the whole thing. And then she goes on to defend it by saying that we've actually seen this type of behavior out of Yoda before, not in continuity before, but afterwards, that, he went through embracing the clone army without thoroughly researching what their background was, where they came from, who actually ordered them. And then she went on to say, also look what he did and expelling Ahsoka Tano from the order based on accusations that they didn't thoroughly investigate either. Only to realize when, she was innocent, oh, you can come back. This was all like a Padawan trial. You could be a Jedi Knight now. So what do you think about this? Is she right? Is she accurate about this, or is this not ringing true for you?
Oh, this is a hard one. I guess I'm of two minds on this because on one side, we've got Yoda who's been sort of the embodiment of the light side of the Force for so long, and he's been the poster child for everything that is good and right and just in the galaxy and fighting for the ultimate, of good. And but she makes some good points. There was some moral ambiguity, if you will, especially at the end of season 1 of The Acolyte. And we saw this a little bit in the High Republic. Yoda was willing to look away from certain kinds of relationships, so, such as Avar and Elzar, and kind of bend the rules a little bit in that way. But gosh, I don't know. I mean, I think that if you're willing to mess with the mythos in that way, that could really change the way people see Yoda, especially for those that are just entering into Star Wars. Whereas we have the history of Yoda and we know what he's been like. But I mean, I've also gone on record by saying, yeah, there were some things in the prequel era that Yoda did that led to or helped to lead to Anakin's downfall and, not doing this or doing that. So I can see where she's coming from too. So I know it's kind of a wishy-washy answer, but gosh, I'm not really sure how I feel about it. How do you feel?
Well, here's the thing. I think her observations have made me pause and reconsider what I think about Yoda. And here's the thing. Yoda's been around for, by the time he dies in Return of the Jedi, 900 years. Okay.
Mhm.
And with that type of a lifespan and that longevity, in as long as he's been on the Jedi Council and has been influencing the Jedi, I think is incredibly naive of Star Wars fans to think he was flawless the entire way. And I'm not saying you thought that at all. You just articulated reasons why he was not. But at the same time, we need to probably re-examine some of the decisions he did make. And I'm talking about George Lucas movies and content here. In Return of the Jedi or Empire Strikes Back and the like, he deliberately conceals from Luke that Darth Vader is his father. And he tries to avoid revealing to Luke in Return of the Jedi that is the case. Even when Luke presses him. And Luke really has to press him. He's like, I have to know. And then he finally gives in. And then he says it's unfortunate. And we could write off the whole notion of that, okay, there's some wisdom there that you got a job to do, but knowing that Darth Vader is your father only makes it more difficult. Okay. But one of the things we appreciate about Luke is that he finds another way, especially after we have the prequel trilogy as background that informs what happens in the original trilogy. That, sure, the Jedi have this idea of non-attachment and that you're separated from your parents and those attachments can drive you to the dark side. But he chose love over all of that. And it prevailed in the end in that regard.
Right.
And so Yoda is not flawless. I would venture to say that if you stacked up everything he ever did as a Jedi, the good is going to outweigh the bad 10, 15, 20, 100 to 1 when it's all said and done. But that doesn't mean he can't make mistakes in that regard. Who was it that we were talking about not long ago that pointed out that, the Jedi had unrealized attachments. For Mace Windu, it was the Republic. For Yoda, it was in fact the Jedi Order. And so for him to do things to protect the Jedi Order, and he probably justified to himself as like, I have to protect the Order because we serve the Force. And what's good for the Jedi is good for the Force. I can see that happening here.
Yeah.
But at any rate, that's just my preliminary thoughts on it.
Oh, yeah, and I mean, we could do an entire podcast episode, I feel like, on Yoda and where things could potentially land with him, but it definitely raises questions about what Yoda and the Jedi were willing to do to protect the idea of the Order and at what cost, and
Yeah.
maybe Yoda's rigidness in the prequels actually stems from this longstanding kind of gray moral area that he's had to combat within himself. You know what I mean? So it
Yeah.
does paint Yoda in a different light, almost, I know he's not human species wise, but it makes him a little bit more human, as you said. It kind of points out those flaws and helps us to explore that. But yeah, I'm sure some fans would side on well, let's keep him pure versus let's make him more human or flawed. So it's a great psychological debate. I love that.
Yeah, and I guess we should also be clear. I've not listened to this episode. I'm only getting this information secondhand through other,
Sure.
through other articles that are reporting on it there. And so maybe the conduct is, Vernestra reveals why it is that she's reported what it is, and then Yoda realizes he's backed into a corner. That doesn't necessarily make it right, but it makes it more understandable, I suppose. And these
Sure.
episodes are never produced. All we're getting is a summary of what might have happened in there.
Mhm.
Furthermore, because they weren't produced, they are in fact not canon in this. So
Exactly.
these are ideas, but they don't really even count. But I do appreciate what Leslie Headland is saying is that for someone that we all look up to and we admire Yoda's wisdom, I mean, how many times do we all quote, do or do not, there is no try, that type of a thing. And the advice that he gave to Luke over this, and he is this, this mensch, this this little character that is full of wisdom, and we all look up to elders like that. He's not infallible, and that's important in this regard. And Obi-Wan's not infallible; he made plenty of mistakes. Even he was convinced that Luke shouldn't know the truth before he ran off and faced Vader. So,
Yeah.
a lot of our Jedi heroes made big mistakes. So
True. Oh, there's so much to explore with this idea.
yeah,
Makes your head spin a little bit.
yeah. Of all the things that were cited there, I get the whole picking up the mantle of the clone army and using them, there was a crisis going on. Perhaps there should have been some pause afterwards to investigate that and report back to the Republic and, maybe giving them an opportunity to oust Palpatine that way. But the bigger sin, as far as I'm concerned, is what they did with Ahsoka on that. And
Mhm.
I think we need to be a little bit careful because, it's funny. One of the things we've talked about a lot on this podcast is how Ahsoka went from being someone that everyone was like really annoyed with when she was introduced in the Clone Wars to being the
Mhm.
darling of Star Wars fans everywhere. And so when she finally got, accused of crimes she did not commit, and the only one that was looking out for her was Anakin, of all people, the guy who
Right.
would fall to the dark side. The Jedi look terrible in that regard, but a
Yeah.
spotlight's being shown on that in that regard compared to everything else the Jedi were doing.
Mhm.
And you so you can't excuse it, but at the same time, it's like, maybe are we overemphasizing that?
Mhm.
So
Mhm. No, good points.
yeah.
Ah, love to talk about this further sometime.
Oh, we definitely will because we have those episodes coming up. So
Yeah.
anyway, on the show. All right. Last thing we've got in this week's news, and I can't remember how much we talked about this or not, but Tamara Morrison at a convention last year had been talking about not wanting to be done with Star Wars and kind of hoping that Boba Fett would get to show up again and that he get to play that role. And he encouraged everybody to contact Lucasfilm, write emails,
I
send
remember
faxes.
this.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And not long after that happened, I guess fans took him up on it because a representative from Lucasfilm called him and said, knock it off. Boba Fett is on the shelf. We'll open the jar later if we need to, but we just don't have any plans for that character right now. Um, so he was at another convention talking about this, or actually, he was actually talking to Inverse. I misspoke. And the quote is, "I was only joking. I'm at a convention and I say stupid things."
I could totally hear him saying that, like,
Yeah.
in real time.
And then he says, "Then I've got Lucasfilm ringing me. Look, you've been put on the shelf, Boba Fett. We might open up the jar later." So, uh, okay. So the takeaways for me on this is that we're not going to see Boba Fett in the Mandalorian and Grogu. I
Mhm.
was not planning on it, but to the extent that that was a possibility, I feel like that's been pretty much closed.
Mhm.
And then beyond that, I was also not expecting to see him in season 2 of Ahsoka, so okay, fine. But to the extent that they're still planning the big Heir to the Empire team up movie that Dave Filoni is supposed to be in, they haven't had any conversations with him about that as well. So anyway, what do you make of all this?
Well, first of all, I think it's hilarious. You gotta be careful what you say at conventions
Yeah,
because you just never know. And I love the whole idea, you're being put on the shelf. I think somewhere I saw that he said, "I'm like a jar of peaches." And I could just see the memes coming out of that. But
yeah,
I thought, okay, the way that I took that is he's in strategic storage. So, like you said, he could be brought out for certain projects here or there. I don't know if he would be necessarily a focus of, one of the characters or anything like that, but he definitely could serve a great purpose in some of these other storylines, that's for sure. He's not getting any younger though. I mean, he's 65 and yeah, he's still in great shape, don't get me wrong, and he still can do a lot of the stunts and that type of thing and hold his own. But there is a certain amount of shelf life, I guess you could say, for him as well. So I think if they're going to use him, they need to do it within the next, few years here beyond what we've got so far. So within the next 10 years, I'm thinking.
yeah, yeah. And we could all look so good at 65. But
No doubt.
yeah, the other thing that I kind of feel bad for him is when he landed that, when they put out the Book of Boba Fett, he was really counting on that being a multi-season type of event that was going to give him a lot of work because he was, there's other articles out there talking about him doing, he was looking forward to seasons 2, 3, and 4 of this, and
Mhm.
then it was season 1 and done. And so I have to commend him that he hasn't really let the resentment for that not happening like spill out into the public, but you really can sense the disappointment that he was looking forward to playing this role more and getting to make more of a extend his career in that regard, and just simply hasn't happened.
Oh, sure. I mean, and he loves the role. He truly does. And he's done
Mhm.
a ton of other things. But I mean, this is definitely, you can just tell every time he's at a convention, when he's talking about it, he's just so proud of it.
Yep.
And quick aside, he is going to be at Fan Expo Cleveland next weekend, March 13th through the 15th. And I'm hoping to go at least one day. So maybe I can swing by and say hi to him.
I hope you get to do that. I hope you
Yeah,
have that
me too.
opportunity. So, all right. Well, there you have it. That is this week's news. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and our discussion of everything that's going on in the galaxy far, far away. If you've enjoyed it, we would invite you to subscribe to the podcast on your podcatcher of choice if you have not done so already. And we'd appreciate your rating and review wherever it is that you listen to your podcasts that support such things. And if you want to catch the entire back catalog of the show, you can do that over at retrozap.com, which features all previous 1007. That is, it still blows my mind. We celebrated
Yep.
1000 a few weeks ago, but every time I have to write that into our show notes or, when I'm creating the episode, that 4-digit thing throws me off every time for just a moment. It's fun. But
It is.
so with that having been said, Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody what our social media contacts are and where else we can found around the internet.
Absolutely. Well, good news is you don't have to keep track of over 1,000 different places where we are. We keep it pretty succinct. So we are at Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust, and we do have some Pinterest boards that you can check out for all kinds of fun ideas for everything Star Wars. So make sure you do that. And then if you're looking for additional places to listen to the podcast, you can always check out YouTube and YouTube Music. And we don't do any video, just the audio, but you can definitely subscribe and share those out as well. And if you have any thoughts on any of our news stories or anything else for that matter, you can drop us a line at our email address, which is podcaststardust@gmail.com. And if you are in need of a closet refresh or just some new swag, you can check out our TeePublic store. And the link to that is in our show notes. And there's all kinds of fun things to choose from. We have 7 different show logo designs available. And every one of those purchases does help to support the show. So if you happen to snag something, please take a picture and tag us. And thanks in advance.
All right. We're going to get everyone up to date on what you got going on with the cosplay.
Absolutely. So over on my Instagram, you can check out what I'm up to at j.snips cosplay. And as I mentioned, the current plan is that I am actually going to Fan Expo Cleveland on Friday the 13th. Ooh, just realized that. And I do have a surprise that I can't talk about just yet, but I will definitely be revealing that very soon. But you can check out, I've been doing some updates on my Ahsoka cosplay, as a matter of fact. And so I was posting those on my stories. And you can check out everything else that I'm up to as well. Once again, that's at j.snips cosplay.
All right. Upcoming on the show. Here's the current plan. Monday, we'll be getting into the next episode of The Clone Wars as part of our rewatch. And then on Wednesday, it'll be the next installment of World Between Worlds. But Jay and I have got a lot going on over the course of March, and a lot of
Yes.
things are in flux. So since we don't have certainty on a lot of things, everything is subject to change. So I apologize in advance if a show you're looking forward to does not come out on the day I just said. But just want to keep that out there. So with that said, thanks again for listening to episode 1008 of Podcast Stars, everyone. Have a great weekend. And until next time, may the Force be with you.